Welcome back. You're watching the Press Club. Before we end our show, it would be remiss of us if we didn't touch on the I guess the big guest story for this week, if not this year. The visit of Pope Francis over in Cuba and the United States. Were you able to follow it?
Yeah, but I followed it. I, in fact, just wrote an article this morning called Vatican Climate Change Just Breezed Across the Americas, from the standpoint that it was a historic visit in many, many ways. But I started the one in Cuba, in that this visit was significant in relations between Cuba and the United States, and in bringing the message, this Pope's message, to the world. First of all, in Cuba, when President Obama picked up his red phone and called President Castro in December to say, let's talk, that wasn't the start. That was the end of a long process that started in the Vatican. Because soon after Pope Francis took over, he summoned the US and the Cubans to the Vatican and said, come, I want to help you all break fences and build bridges. And it was at the conclusion of those secret talks in the Vatican that President Obama started the process. And as we know, as we speak today, the Cuban flag is flying in America. The American flag is flying in Havana. Cuba has appointed an ambassador to the US, but the US can't, President Obama can't appoint an ambassador to Havana because the filibustering Congress, the Republicans in the Congress have blocked that. In the same way that they have promised that they are going to block any effort to lift the blockade. However, by the time Pope Francis went and left Cuba, he had been able to convince Raul Castro to release 3,500 prisoners. He had been able to win a very serious concession from the Cuban state to allow the Catholic Church to build more churches and open those that are closed. And he was able to say Mass in Revolution Square against the backdrop of Che Guevara, and go to Santiago and visit a Christian shrine that had never been visited by any pope.
But also very interesting, there were a number of moves made on the US side just hours before his arrival in terms of the remittances, businesses being able to move into Cuba, telecommunications companies being able to offer roaming and that sort of thing. I don't think we can underestimate the influence and the power of the Pope at all.
Oh no!
I don't think it's coincidence.
It's not coincidence. I mean, the Holy See, which is the name of the people think the Vatican is. Vatican City is the capital of the Holy See. The Holy See is only an observer at the United Nations, but the Pope is as powerful and even more powerful than some presidents, prime ministers, and kings.
But he is a head of state, right?
Yeah, he is a head of state. He is a head of state. He's ruler over. He's the king of his kingdom. He might not be able to influence government policy, but you listen to his speeches and they influence public opinion. So that the Pope, for example, when he told the U.S. Congress, when his constant criticisms of capitalism, his criticism of the boundless greed, you know, of the capitalists the world over. I mean, when he told the Americans not to see refugees as numbers but as persons, that didn't go down well in a Congress that has already blocked President Obama's efforts to naturalize 11 million undocumented aliens and allow them to stay in the United States. Now, you know, he said the right things in the right places. I mean, here you have the Pope being able, John Boehner, John Boehner. I mean, John Boehner actually says he woke up in the morning, he said his prayers, he met the Pope, and after finished, and he and the Pope were alone. The Pope hugged him, and the Pope asked him, "Pray for me." You know, and he decided he finished it that. He gave up the speaker thing. I'm not saying that the Pope convinced him or
and when he announced the resignation, one of the reporters, the first questions he was asked was did the Pope influence your decision? You know, so it seems that...
Right.
You know,
then he also, Raul Castro. Right now, the average person wouldn't know that Fidel and Raul were raised in a Catholic home, and they were being taken over by Jesuits. And Pope Francis is a Jesuit. And after he met, after his long meetings with Fidel and Raul Castro, Raul said words to the effect that the Pope almost made him want to pray again. Start praying again.
I was told that he, well, I read rather in one of the newspapers that he handed him a book by Father Armando Lorente, who was an exiled priest from Cuba. You know, perhaps in very subtle ways, you know, the Pope understands his influence and his power, and he wields it very expertly.
Oh yeah, he uses it. I mean, the guy went to Madison Square Garden, you know, addresses 20,000 people, and when he was addressing the Congress, at the end of his speech, he says, "God bless America." Tears came out of some of those people's eyes, you know, because I mean, they didn't expect that. So he knew the right little drops. And I mean, the guy went to the States and drove around in a Fiat. He insists on his simplicity. I mean, you look at him walk, his demeanor, his decision to refuse the palatial grandeur that comes with his position. You know, I mean, he insisted that he's living in Italy. He'll go to the US with an Italian car. So he got a Fiat, in which is his new Pope Mobile. And, well, he's in Philadelphia today. I think it's the last day
last leg
of his visit. Popes come and go. In our lifetime, we've seen some of them come and go too fast. There are some unique situations right now. There are actually two popes at the Vatican. The other one who resigned Benedict, the day after he set up his Twitter account. I quite remember that. You know, I say, well, you know, Pope Benedict going to start hitting the airwaves. Then the next day he announces resignation. I say, well, he's going to start tweeting, but you can't have two popes in town. But we do. The other one is that this is the first Latin American Pope, and he is there at a time when the church is losing numbers globally. You know, Brazil is one of the biggest constituencies of Catholics, and people are walking away from the church. United States, Latin America, everywhere. So he has a big task to fill. He's been there for 1 year. And he's done quite a lot. For example, he's let the pedophiles in the church know that he's cleaned up the Vatican jail. He's made some concessions insofar as divorces, you know, because the traditional position of the church is that, you know, divorcees ought not to separate, and a divorced woman, you know, has less of a soul. You know, what he has done is that whereas before only a bishop could have pardoned a divorcee, he has made it possible for a divorcee to get a pardon from a priest within a year. If you know, if you make that complaint or make that request within a year after the divorce. There too, conservative Catholic, the conservatives in the Catholic Church are not taking that one as they're not taking it easy, because they consider that he's moving too fast and too far on that one. The conservatives who oppose his moves against the pedophiles, they're less noisy, because it's not something they can defend.
Yeah, but speaking of moving fast, and we run out of time, moving fast, and I want to shift focus back to Cuba for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, I think things have moved a lot faster than I expected.
Then we all expect.
I think I expected a very long, drawn-out process, but things have happened very rapidly. Tourism up by 40%. A British consortium pumping 400 million. There's a big $1 billion port project going on in anticipation of all the trade that's going to happen in Cuba. We have American companies lobbying hard in Washington, D.C., jostling to get into Cuba. Big names too, Chevron, you know, Pfizer. But is that going to come up against a brick wall where the Castros are concerned?
No, it's not. The normal diplomatic ties...
Because it remains a one-party state.
No, diplomatic ties have been re-established. But as sure as day follows night, normalization of relations is not going to happen for as long as the Americans keep the Guantanamo naval base in Cuba, and for as long as the embargo remains in place. President Obama cannot move the embargo because the Congress is dominated by the Republicans, and they have told him don't even think of it. The naval base in Guantanamo, Obama wanted to close down the prison, and he ran against a brick wall. So the national security network in the United States is going to put up a fight against any president who wants to withdraw America's continued illegal occupation of the Guantanamo, because the lease has run out, and you know they're certainly not at the pleasure of the Cubans. So yes, Cuba and the United States and the respective peoples and economies are going to benefit. But President Obama is president of the United States. He is Uncle Sam, and what he has said to America is, listen, we have been fighting this battle in the wrong way for the past 55 years. The embargo is not going to work. We cannot fight if we stay in the way. Let us engage and therefore be in with the Cubans so that Cuban people could see and hear us and we could talk to them.
But let's not forget, this is not pure altruism at work here.
No.
China is actively involved in Cuba.
Yes.
In all sectors.
Russia
as well. You know, and we're talking about Russians doing military exercises in the region.
Well, let's put it this way. When the U.S. only had an interest section not too long ago, the Cubans were able to expose how U.S. aid had recruited young rappers, you know, to sing anti-American songs. I think what Obama is saying is, if we could have done that, you know, not being there, let's go and see how much more we could do if we are there. And if the average Cuban could walk into the embassy, you know, and apply for asylum or file complaints, you know, I think Obama is saying to America, but the Republicans are not listening. Let's engage so that we could get more Cubans to accept our position, so that we can be in a position to help the Cubans fight against this communist regime. If we stay away, we leave them at the hands of the communists. But if we go in there, we can, you know, we could dance with Castro and at least make him offers, you know. But I think that the Pope played an important role. One other significant development in Cuba while he was there, and I'm yet to know, excuse me, I'm yet to know whether he had anything to do with that. But while Pope Francis was in Cuba, President Raul Castro announced to the world and brought together President Manuel Santos of Colombia and the leader of the FARC rebels, and they have finally decided to sign a truce to end the longest running guerrilla war in the history of Latin America. I don't think it is by coincidence that that announcement was made while that Latin American Pope, that Argentinian Pope was there. And my last piece on that was that the Pope this Pope might be the result of some divine intervention and revelation of prophecy, in that Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, as two communists at the United Nations in 1962, when the United States announced that they had broken relations with Cuba, Che asked Fidel, it's there, the picture is there, the words are there, everything is there. It's true, the Americans have acknowledged that. Che asked Fidel, Fidel, when you think the Americans will ever re-establish relations with us? And Fidel said, when America has a black president and the Pope is an Argentinian like you.
Really?
Today America has a black president and the Pope is an Argentinian like Che was. Fidel was being prophetic.
Always a pleasure.
Same here.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. We'll be back here next week with another program. Hopefully you'll join us then as well. Have yourselves an enjoyable and safe weekend.